We'd like to welcome our special guest today. He is a CBS Mornings anchor who delivers the news to as many as 3 million network viewers every single morning. Nate Burleson has interviewed former President Barack Obama, Michael J. Fox, Patrick Mahomes. Do we know who that is? Okay. And Berry Gordy, just to name a few. A former wide receiver, Burleson had an 11-year career in the NFL, playing with the Minnesota Vikings, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Detroit Lions. He also anchors on CBS's NFL Today. Let's give a warm welcome to Nate Burleson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I worked really very hard on that intro. So, sometimes life's journey isn't a direct one, right? So you had a very unconventional path to journalism, right? After you played in the NFL, you went to the NFL Network. But then can you walk us through what sparked your interest into getting into journalism itself?
Yeah, there were a few inspirations that date back to my younger days. Local news was something that I grew up on. I was that kid that sat in front of the TV and waited to see what was going on locally, what the weather was going to be, and what was happening in sports. I'm an 80s baby. I was raised in the 90s and influenced by the 2000s. So I'm a product of those eras. And I remember vividly thinking about these local anchors and reporters that were so good at their job. Because when you're working on a local level, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but when you're working on a local level, you're oftentimes overworked and underappreciated.
Yes.
And by overworked, I mean you're very, very versatile. You have to be, because they have you covering everything from local politics to sports, societal issues. So I was fascinated by them. And then there were some major iconic figures in news and sports, like Ed Bradley, seeing a black man that can cover everything from politics, pop culture, issues going on in the country, and then sit down with some of the biggest names. I remember watching him sit down with Muhammad Ali, and it was mind-blowing because I saw this black man, handsome, with a beard and an earring in, talking to Muhammad Ali, who was bigger than life, and it sank in with me at that moment that you can be a anchor, you can be a correspondent, you can be a journalist and still sit down with people that you admire. And then another guy that I looked at when I was younger was a guy by the name of Ahmad Rashad. He was a wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings back in the day. So he played in the NFL and was a really good wide receiver. And then in the 90s, he ended up being one of the biggest names in NBA coverage. There was a show called Inside the NBA. So me, as a teenager, I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that this football player was talking about the NBA and no one was making a big deal about it. Because I just thought you live in the box that you're put in. So football players are supposed to talk about football, right? But not Ahmad Rashad. And it just so happens he was really cool with Jordan. So he was getting these exclusive interviews with MJ, who was the biggest name in all of sports. And there was a seed at that moment that blossomed into, who you see right now. Because as soon as I left the game and people started to create this box for me, I started to beat down the walls and say, no, I'm much more than the career that I had. That was just a small part of me. It was what I did. It wasn't who I am.
Wow, that is just incredible. So then when you went into journalism itself, what kind of learning curve did you have to deal with?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that there was a learning curve because, when you play football at a high level, we get infatuated with the minor details of playing the sport. Of course, it's a physical game, but we are students 99% of the time. So we get lost in those details. As an analyst, when I left the game, I looked at being anchor for my sports show the same way. So the transition into entertainment to news, it was similar. It's like I'm talking about a different subject, but I'm studying it the same way. Um, the biggest adjustment I had to make was one, being able to multitask on a high level without burning myself out.
Mhm.
When you're talking sports, it's just sports, right? Most of the time, it's this jovial energy. You know, we're celebrating the sport every day, the big highlights, the big games. Sometimes we'll talk about tough topics, but most of the time, it's this jubilant atmosphere. And then as I transition into news, you know, because you're talking about so many different things, and I'm somewhat of an empath, I would cover school shooting or an earthquake, something that would happen, and I would read the story, and I couldn't shake it off like I would if I was just reading highlights for my football show. And I would go home, and this stuff would weigh on me like a fur coat soaked in rain. And that would happen week after week. And I had to figure out a way to decompress and unplug so I can hit the reset in order to come in each day refreshed and ready to tell new stories. Because as we all know, working in this space, there's ups and there's downs. We're just here to tell the story. As Gail says it, we have a front row seat to history. We
Yes.
are just
Yeah.
opening up the window to the world.
Mhm.
And that was one of the biggest adjustments initially, which was kind of turning that switch off as I went home.
Mhm. Yes, because that is not really something that anyone can really learn, how to deal with that mental, with that weight and that capacity. So what were some of the things that you did, to kind of decompress? Are you a meditator? I mean, I'm guessing you exercise.
I try a little bit. I'm 42, so I don't exercise as much as I used to. Um, yeah, I like peace and quiet. You
Uh-huh.
know, at this age, being alone, being able to get out of my own head.
Mhm.
Meditation is key. My big brother Kevin, he's one of the most Zen individuals in the world. So he told me that I need to pick up meditation. I started that some years ago. Um, you know, I used to casually read for fun, but now we read so many books because we have authors in every single week.
Yes.
It's hard to pick up a book and just read it on the weekend because typically I'm working and doing homework on the
Mhm.
weekend. I mean, I have my assistant, one of my producers, say hi to Nairi and Alicia. They work for CBS. And there's times where, you know, it'll be a Friday.
Yeah.
And Nairi will come in and he'll say, all right, here's the flags for the next week or so. And here's who we have coming up next
Yeah.
week. Because I like to get a little jump on, you know, who we have sitting at our table. And he's like, and we also have a few authors coming in. So you might want to take these books home. And I remember one week he gave me like 6 books.
Oh my God, for the whole week.
And I
For the
was
whole
like,
week.
bro, what do you want me to do with this? I'm going to take 3 of these and I'll try to tackle these over the next couple of days. And then I'll pick back the other ones at the end of the week. So, you know, reading used to be fun. Now it's somewhat homework. And then also, you know, I am this kind of goofball, introspective poet, somewhat somewhat of a 90s baby
Yeah.
that fell in love with cinema and music, that became an NFL athlete.
Mhm.
What got lost during my career was that person because you're so focused on being a football player.
Mhm.
What I learned about myself over the last decade is that the more that I tap into the roots of who I am, the better I feel about myself on a daily basis.
Wow.
So to answer your question, a very long-winded way, yeah, I just get back to the things that make me smile. So I listen to music, I watch movies. If I can vacation, I will. If not, just put smiles on people that are close to me.
Well, what a fantastic answer. You're touching on so many different things, and I did have questions, but I think I'm going to jump around a little bit
Yeah,
because
please
of
do.
what you just said about, being who you are, right? So we launched a TV news and digital specialization, and I talked to my students who are all sitting here in the first 2 rows. I talked to them about finding their own voice and being authentic
Mm.
to themselves, to tell the story, to tell tough stories, but also to be authentic. How did you, find your own voice, and like, how long did it take for you to do that? Because that's not easy.
It's not easy, and that's a great question. It's hard for everybody, whether you're in front of or behind the camera. I think it's hard for anybody that leaves high school or college and is trying to find themselves as an adult, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, your voice and your identity. I think it's even more difficult for athletes because we leave the game and we want to be the people that we looked up to. So when I first joined the NFL Network, there were these big names like Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, as he is now, Michael Irvin, Marshall Faulk, and these guys had very unique personalities. Deion is flashy, had a nice suit on. He's up there swagging it out all over the set. Yeah. And Michael Irvin, he had this very raspy voice, and he gets going, and veins start popping out, and he feels like he's giving you a pregame speech. And then you had Marshall Faulk, who would articulate his points very well, and he was one of the more intellectual analysts that you ever been around. And I remember the first few weeks, I was like a chameleon. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know I was until I started watching myself back. And really all I was doing was imitating these men that I looked up to. And after a while of watching myself and really being honest, mm-hmm. criticizing myself, I realized that the world doesn't need the second coming of those guys. Mm-hmm. They need the most authentic version of me. Now, even if I saw that in that moment and came to that realization, it was hard to figure out what that was. So what does being me look like?
Right.
Being me look like someone who is more relatable than flashy. Mm-hmm. Someone who is empathetic rather than brash. Being me is someone who speaks with a certain cadence because mm-hmm. I'm a poet and I love music. And once I did that, I started to shed all of these influences, and I became Nate. And I promise you, it was almost overnight. Doors started opening up faster than ever because the uniqueness of who I am made producers and networks reach out faster because mm-hmm. now there's a specific type that I am providing to their show or to their network. And I think that right there was the turning point in my career. Now, mm-hmm. I would say that took years. I retired in 2014, joined the NFL Network, and it took me 2.5 years to really find my voice. And then it's not only finding your voice, it's being comfortable in your voice. Mm-hmm. It's being comfortable when somebody says that what you're doing isn't working, or when you're having casual conversation with football players and they're like, man, you're a little too sensitive, or why would you want to recite poetry on the show? Yeah. When you're coming up against these critiques that are coming from an ill place, like how do you, as we say, stand on business these days mm-hmm. and continue to be who you are? And once I fought through that, I landed on who I am now. Now, the funny part is, after I found my voice at the NFL Network and then moved to New York, I was trying to figure out an exit strategy because I didn't want to talk about football for 40 years. I love the game. Don't get mm-hmm. me wrong. It's provided such a launch pad for me in my life. But I realized at 60 years old, I didn't want to be that old man talking about a young man's game, mm-hmm. especially when I have all these interests. I'm a restaurant owner that started clothing lines. I write poetry. I want to launch a production company. So why would I box myself in talking about football? So then I strategically started placing myself in other areas. Started working for Extra to show people that I can sit down with any entertainer in the world. And then I started making my way from the sports side of the CBS building to the digital side where they talked about everything else.
At Extra?
At CBS, at the
CBS?
Broadcast Center.
Yes, okay.
So I would go over there when they would ask me to come break down the schedule and talk about the big games that are going to be on the slate this year for CBS. I would go over there and I'd do that. But in between the takes, I'd spark up conversations about finances or politics, what's going on in society, talk about my interest in writing or cinema. And I did that because one of the first things I learned was the microphone's always on.
Yes.
Somebody's listening. And sure enough, by the time I walked away, they're like, oh, he's not what I thought he is. He's a little bit more than just a football player that knows how to talk about football. So I did that, and that all worked. And my plan was taking shape. People recognized Nate for being more than a ball player. Then CBS Mornings came calling. And I remember when I first did a few hits, which I was filling in for Vlad, doing What to Watch. And I was me. I was authentically me. I had my braids in my hair. I think I had a suit jacket on with some shorts like Bart Simpson. Like I was really like in my bag, because I wanted to like leave my scent there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a sweet cologne. I wanted to like walk out the building, and when I left,
And
it was like
you were still going to be there.
right, exactly. And it worked. And I was thinking to myself, I bet they'll give me an opportunity. They brought me back in. They're like, yeah, we have somebody out again. Would you love to, come back? And at that point, I'm like, oh, this is an audition. So I'm gonna take advantage. And I did, and they offered me a seat at the table, which I am completely thankful. I'm thankful for and extremely blessed to have. But here's the reset again. Now I start questioning who I am. I'm on the news. Should I be wearing braids? What about my suits? Should I dial it down? And I started listening to people. Well, in news, we don't really, we don't really dress like that. And in news, we don't really see people with braids. There's a certain cadence and tone that all news anchors talk with. So just keep all that in mind when you're figuring out who you are.
Were you asking those questions of people, or were they just coming to you, saying those things, dropping those comments?
People were offering their opinion.
Yes.
And people that really shouldn't have been offering their opinion. And I started to listen. And before I knew it, day 1 through day 30, I wasn't the fullest version of myself. Which is why if you look back at my first handful of weeks there versus who I am now, how I sit, how I address the camera or those at the table, how I occupy space with my elbows out, it's different now than it was then. So I say all that to say this. There's been times in my life where I had to look in the mirror and hit the reset and ask, are you being exactly who you're supposed to be in this moment right now? And if the answer is no, you don't have to feel bad for yourself. It happens. Sometimes we conform. That's what life does. It starts to mold you. But once you figure out that you're uncomfortable, you break out that mold and you get to show everybody exactly who you are.
So, you had to extend yourself. You had to take charge of your own, of your own domain, so to speak. No one came up to you to say, hey, can you do this? You planted the seeds. You went the extra mile.
Yeah.
You networked, really. You took every opportunity.
For sure.
Right? So now, you were just talking about taking up space and all of that other stuff. So a lot of people, students in particular, find that they're dealing with imposter syndrome. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, the being in a space that they somehow feel that they don't necessarily belong.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that way?
Yeah, for sure.
And how did you come out of it?
The first time I felt it was 2003 when I got drafted into the NFL. You would think a guy who's been playing sports his whole life gets drafted, a team hands him a check and say, go play football, he'd be comfortable with himself. But when you walk in a locker room and you're surrounded by guys who you perceive as better athletes making more money, then you start to question your own talent. And the reason I love to bring up football, because a lot of the lessons I learned parallel things that are going on in society. We walk into these spaces, whether it's school or work, and all of a sudden we minimize ourselves because It could be insecurities, but you can also be threatened by other talent out there. And I remember for about a year in the NFL, I was questioning whether I belonged. Now, mind you, I'm coming off of a collegiate career that was one of the best in school history, broke all kind of records. So confidence was through the roof when I was at that level. And then when I moved up a notch, all of a sudden fear started sinking in. And it wasn't until I started making plays and my teammates recognized how good I was. Now my confidence starts growing. Fast forward to transitioning out of the game and now being on TV, the same thing happens. You go from working at the NFL Network, joining CBS Mornings, and you're sitting next to Gayle King. Extremely intelligent, so talented, versatile, one of the coolest women I've ever met.
And down to earth,
And
just like
down
you.
to earth,
Yeah.
cool as ever. Tony DeCopo,
Right.
one of the best in the business. I mean, can cover everything. And then what he does when it comes to the man on the street, hand him a microphone and let him go talk, I don't think there's anybody better. Vlad Dutier, who is literally one of my favorite people in the world, one of the most intelligent guys, worldly. We don't give him enough space to show how talented and versatile he is, along with every other anchor, correspondent across this CBS universe. And here I am, this football player. Now, I walk in with years of experience in TV, years. And not just when I retired, I started doing TV. The year I got drafted, I did TV every summer and worked locally, worked for the NFL Network, did radio, TV. So my experience in media dates back 2 decades. I still walk in feeling threatened by people that have been welcoming. I sit at that table and hear those intrusive thoughts. Do I belong here? Am I supposed to be at this table? Like, I know I'm not Gayle. I'm not Tony. How do I prove that I belong? But just like football, when I started making plays, those intrusive thoughts, they dissipated. It's the same thing in TV. Once me, my team, they put us out on the road, we started doing interviews, telling stories, bringing back pieces, adding value to the show. Ratings got better. You know, they say men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So the results,
Yes.
in other words, when I started making plays and adding value to the show, there's no way I can look in the mirror and ask myself if I belonged. I knew I belonged. And not only do I belong, but occasionally I'm going to try my best to raise the bar because I know the standard at CBS.
Wow. So, you were talking about stories and going out and shooting stories and pitching and probably writing, right? You've done so much. You've done sports stories. You've interviewed presidents. One of the most moving pieces of yours that I've seen of late, I watch every morning, is that it's your piece that you did a few weeks ago on the 1921 Tulsa massacre.
Yeah.
And that story really hit close to home with your family. Just in case some of the people in this room don't know about the piece, can you walk us through it and just tell us how it came about and how deeply personal it was for you?
Yeah, I have that in my notes.
Oh.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Good.
So if you're not familiar with the Tulsa race riot, there was a massacre that happened because a young black man was accused of sexually assaulting a white woman in the elevator. The results of that was basically a white mob tearing through the city, the black part of the city, and killing people that lived there, forcing them out of their homes, destroying the property, which really changed the course of the lives of people that were there. So you fast forward, I don't know, me in my mid-30s, and I'm learning about this. And I'm infuriated. I'm like, how did I not learn about this in school?
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, there's a lot of dark history here in the United States that we don't learn about. So it's just one of those things that always been in the back of my mind. Like, I would love to know more about it. Mind you, my wife is from Oklahoma. She was born there. And we've been married since 2004. So we just recently started talking about it because now I'm in news and I can tell the stories that I would like to tell. And she's like, I think that my great grandfather owned property on Black Wall Street, which is what it was called. And I'm like, really? Well, we gotta find out if he did or not. So she starts reaching out to relatives. We're having normal conversations at night, and she says, yeah, it's confirmed. We owned property, and his property was burned down. He owned a hotel there, along with, we owned a real estate company and a barber shop. So immediately I go to my team. I pitch this story. I say, hey, I have a story that I would like to pitch. It's personal to me, and I think it's great for Black history. My wife has a personal connection to Black Wall Street. So at that point, they get together, and then we all talk on a Zoom and figure out if we can execute it. Figure out the story, the arc of the story, the characters, how are we going to tell it, and how will we execute it. And then I give them a handful, maybe 10 questions that I would like to know. They do their research and they add on their questions. And from there, we really start to format and create a plan of attack. So we flew out there to Tulsa and we went to Black Wall Street. And really, we just thought it would be a story about the businesses there, drawing that connection between my wife and her great grandfather. Lo and behold, as we were leaving the museum, a security guard says, hey, I know you guys are. I'm a big fan of you as a football player now, as a journalist. What are you guys doing? And I'm like, oh, well, my wife, her relatives had a hotel here and a real estate company and a barber shop. And he's like, it's funny you say that because when they were building this museum, I was still security here, and they built it on top of a hotel. And I'm like, really? He says, yeah, and I took a picture. So while they were in construction, he was just walking by one day and was like, oh, that's interesting. There's a couple pillars there. Looks like an entrance to a place. Snaps a picture. Finds out through a historian locally that that's a hotel. Come to find out, at the end of this piece, 2 days of shooting, we were standing on the same spot her great-grandfather's hotel was. We walk outside this museum, and that's where it was. And it was mind-blowing. There was times where I would watch a piece like this, on 60 Minutes or your local news, and I would always say, there's no way it came together like that. Right. Come on now, they set all that up. Sure enough, that's how it came together. And that's the beauty of working in this space. It is the most rewarding job that I have ever had. And now, I loved football. Like being able to score a touchdown and see 70,000 people rise to their feet, or be on the road and hear people booing you. You suck. We're going to kick your ass. You're going down today, Burleson.
And you like that?
Yeah. Oh. To score a touchdown on the road and hear silence.
Yeah.
To play the villain, like there's nothing that can replace that. Like you're literally a rock star with pads on. Mm-hmm. But it's a different type of feeling when you pitch a story, you frame it, you get together with your team, they do their work, their research, film it, and then we show it on TV, and then you hear people talk about it afterwards, whether it's online, come up to you in person. It's the best job that I've ever had. And it's hard work, but like I said, the most rewarding job I've ever had.
For those of you who may not have seen it, let me know. I'll send you the link. It's a fantastic piece to watch. So I think that's also really good. That story, the Tulsa massacre story, is a great example, I think, of how any national story starts with a local news angle.
Mhm.
That's a local story,
Yeah.
right? And quite honestly, I feel we're in New York, right? Any international story starts with a local story. So
Yeah.
local news is
I wrote that in my notes too. You're good.
You did?
You're good.
That's my. So I talked briefly to you about this, that half of our incoming class in the fall is going to be attending tuition free. Okay.
That's amazing.
So, and then we have this campaign to be fully tuition free by 2027. What do you think that means to the journalism field, and why do you think it's important to have to level that playing field? A little bit of football here, a little football term, to level the playing
I like
field
that. See what you
for
did there.
journalism. I'm trying hard for journalism, for local journalism. To bring those voices and to tell the stories that need to be told.
You make such a good, valid point. Every story, every piece, every iconic figure, politician, actor, actress, author, whatever it is, it starts on a very, very local level. It's always covered locally first. The larger stories, of course, we grab because that's our jobs. But supporting local journalism, it's literally the heartbeat of everything that we do. And there's so many different forms of it. I mean, I don't have to preach to you guys, it's like preaching to the choir, but with all the different forms of journalism, from broadcast to investigative, entertainment, print, news, you have the ability on a local level to create an impact. And that ripple effect can reach around the world. And not only that, like I said, when I first saw the local journalist as a kid, that left a lasting impression on me. And most of the superstars that we know today in TV, in front of or behind the camera, or in print, the best editors, the best producers, directors, the people that run the floor, they all started on somewhat of a local level or mentored by somebody that worked on a local level. So having an opportunity to create a level playing field, giving people opportunities that they might not have because of a lack of resource, it's so important. I've always felt that even if you might not have the means to chase your career, there should be a way for somebody to fuel your vehicle. And this is exactly that.
Great. Well, we're going to open it up to questions, but I just have one last question because I think I'm going to get killed if I don't ask you about this. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl for one quick minute.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Yeah, no doubt.
You anchored NFL Today's pregame show, right? Then you called the game on Nickelodeon.
Mm-hmm.
And then, 2 or 3 hours later, you had to be ready to co-anchor 4 a.m. Pacific time, okay, on CBS Mornings.
Yeah.
How did you pull something like that off? A lot of Red Bull?
A lot of Red Bull,
Yeah?
for sure. That was the busiest week of my life.
Yeah.
They've been working with me for quite some time. From the moment last year's Super Bowl ended, I started thinking about the following Super Bowl. And that's no exaggeration. I mean, the day it ended, I started thinking about it. And it stayed on my mind, top of mind, every single week. I would constantly bring it up, reminding myself that it's going to be a grind. We landed in Las Vegas. I was wearing multiple hats, working for Nickelodeon, of course, CBS Mornings. NFL Today is the main job because we're covering the Super Bowl. All the while, we're trying to land as many interviews as we can. So I sat down with Patrick Mahomes. I sat down with a wife of a player who's a designer. I already had one interview with Usher in the bank that we were going to show that day. In my head, I knew that I was either going to be extremely exhausted trying to enjoy Vegas or I'd have enough energy to power through the week and leave my fingerprints all over our coverage. Um, and quite frankly, to be honest, I did. I wanted people to know that I was one of the most versatile talents. You know, sometimes in order to not feel like an imposter, you gotta remind people that you're pretty good at your job. Now, I could sit here and say it was all me. I have a great team around me. You know, we all put in the work. We all had these really hellacious hours. But it was the first Super Bowl where I didn't enjoy the city that it was in. So, for those who don't know, if you're a football player or you work in TV and you go to a Super Bowl, people will they pay you just to show up and sign autographs and high five and hug people. Um, and there's every single party that you're invited to because they want all the ball players on the list and at the red carpet. And this is Vegas, so it's
Right.
all of that times 10. So I got invited to every party. I got invited to go make a ton of money signing autographs. And I said no to everything because my commitment was being the best version of myself on TV. That week, I didn't leave my hotel past 9 p.m. I didn't eat outside my room. I ordered room service. I made sure that I was preparing for the next day's show. Sometimes you gotta just, it's tough, but you gotta just jump in the water and not pick your head up till you get to the end, you know?
Did you sleep before the 4 a.m. call? I mean, for the
I
show.
I took a nap. You're talking about after the Super Bowl?
After the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
Super Bowl before
So
CBS
after the
Mornings.
Super Bowl, the
Like a
game
nap?
ended. It was around 8.
Yeah.
And then I went to the hotel, packed my bags up, closed my eyes for about 40 minutes. And then, yeah, we did our show in the morning.
That's what I thought. That's incredible. Well, you did a terrific job.
Well, thank you. I
mean,
appreciate that.
So I think we can open it up to questions because I took up 10 after 1. Questions?
Yeah, don't be shy. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you for asking the question about the Super Bowl because I really like the coverage.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I
Especially
told
the
you.
one in Nickelodeon with SpongeBob and everything.
Yeah, the
Oh,
Nickelodeon one was lit,
SpongeBob.
huh?
So my question actually has to do a little bit with football and in which way like playing football before informed your experience and how different it was like from other people that didn't have that background like working with a big team and how did it inform like the coverage overall.
Oh, playing football in the NFL and how that kind of impacted who I am now as an analyst and a journalist. Uh, Football is unique because you have 60 plus people on a roster, all from different backgrounds, different religious beliefs, different preferences on relationships, life, came from different backgrounds, but we all have this common goal. I love football because there's 60 dudes in a locker room that have to coexist with each other. And you can imagine 60 guys all making a different amount of money, big egos, big problems. But we put all that aside to win a championship. And if one person goes off track, that could derail the whole train. When I got into TV, as much as I am a Leo and I love the stage and I love, the attention, the first thing I want to do is coexist. I want us all to win. And I think football taught me that. I can sit on the show with Gail and Tony and Vlad and not worry about speaking because I know my teammates are doing a good job. But just like football, you pass me the ball, I'm going to score a touchdown. So I think my experience as a football player, it made me an easy employee to hire because I'll always be team oriented. Because in my mind, if the team wins, then I win.
That's great. Teamwork. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Truth Headlam. My question for you is, you did mention people offering their opinions in relation to your persona, like how you dress, how you looked. You also mentioned how you had to shed that chameleon-esque attitude that you had in terms of adapting things you saw from other players that you admired. When it came to overall your success, how did you discern whose opinions and what opinions to actually take in? Because I'm sure through social media, through your own connections, you hear a lot of opinions. So how did you decide?
That's tough. That is tough. You know, this day and age we live in is unique because of social media. I remember social media really took off towards the end of my career. I'm 42, so I got drafted in 2003. So we didn't really have Twitter and IG. We didn't have trolls and fans that loved you and hate you from one week to the next. But towards the end of my career, and as I transitioned into TV, social media was huge. And I'm not going to lie to you. I would see 1,000 tweets and posts about how good I did, how well I speak, how big of a fan someone is. And then it'd be one post that says, I don't like that guy. He's a tryhard. Or something about him rubs me the wrong way. Or I hate his braids. Or, he think he can rap. Whatever it is. But I would always focus on the negative. And I realized it was bigger than social media. It's human nature. We have so many people around us that build us up. But the people that may criticize us or say something to us that makes us feel a certain type of way, we fixate on it. Now, if it's someone close to you, someone that you genuinely look up to, admire, or mentor, listen and hang on to every word. If they got your back, even when they are criticizing you, they will make it a compliment sandwich. They'll tell you how great you are, they'll criticize you, and then they'll compliment you. But if it's someone that is here today, going tomorrow, or someone that has zero impact on your life, or can't decide the fate of who you are or what you're doing, let that stuff go. What I started doing, I just started deleting people, blocking people. And that was liberating. In social media, just blocking somebody, like, why am I even tripping about this person? Why am I even concerned about how this person feels about me? Now, if it's a regular fan that has a legit criticism, if somebody says, hey, yo, Nate, them suits is getting a little tight, man, you might want to start working out. I might even tweet back, hey, respect, I've been going hard in the paint. Pasta heavy in December, I'm whatever. But if it's somebody that's attacking me for no reason, making me feel bad about myself, I'm going to block you. And what I love about that moment in my life, which really just happened recently, to be honest with you, I started realizing you could block people in real life. And I'm not talking about just like blocking people on your phone. I mean, not putting yourself in spaces and places where people are going to pull at your energy and leave you depleted. We got so much going on. Why in the hell would we be around somebody, I don't care if it's family or friends, that is going to drain your battery? For what? Life is exhausting enough. So what I started doing is I stopped hanging around certain people. I stopped picking up certain phone calls. And even people I may know at work that have zero impact on my job, they always got something funny to say. I stopped seeing them at the water cooler. We have to realize that at some point, we're the drivers of this vehicle, even though sometimes we feel like we're in the passenger seat. Take back that wheel, and decide who you're going to let affect you.
Great advice. My goodness. Who else has a question?
Okay, yes, I have a question. Actually, I am amazed the way that you are tackling certain challenges. Well, the first one is you were a career changer, and you make it incredible. And now you are tackling one of the aspects that are affecting us, which is the equity and inclusion in certain aspects of the society. You gave us some hints about how to tackle those challenges, but I would like to hear your vision. about
Mm.
equity and inclusion, especially in journalism, but
Mm.
also what are the advice that you can give us, well, to the career changers that are becoming journalists?
That's a really good question. Um, I am a direct result of trailblazers that came before me, men and women of color that were able to kick down the door in a time where they were fighting against more resistance than I could fathom. Um, it's one thing to say that, media companies should be more inclusive, should be more diverse. I remember a study, I think it was the Harvard Business Review years ago. They said companies that are in the top percentile in inclusion and diversity are 35% more likely to have better financial gains. Because I'm a bottom line guy, and I've owned a restaurant before and launched businesses, money talks. So the reason I bring that up, not that we're chasing the almighty dollar, but the people we work for are chasing the almighty dollar. And biggest thing we can do is, one, continue to push the envelope and open up doors for each other. But when we walk in those doors prove to be an asset and add value to these companies. And as we add value, we increase our own. Now, me personally, like I said earlier, I am getting ready to launch a production company. I love being in front of the camera, but I want to be behind it because I feel like there's more stories to tell, and there's not enough of me. And I want my production company to be as diverse as it can be, to represent every sexual preference, every shade of human, different perspectives. Because I know if we are trying to authentically tell the stories that we want, that's white, black, everything in between, we need that representation in the room. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to continue to excel at the jobs that I have. So once I do put out content and produce content and put a team together, people know that the same standard of excellence will follow. And we need more people that can do that. It's one thing for people that have a position of power or influence to say, we need more diversity, we need more inclusion. But if they aren't trying to open up doors, then it's all talk. So when you have an opportunity to help, hire, lend a hand, you do it. You show up. When she came to visit, she said, hey, say no more. Are you sure? Say no more. We'll set it up. How come? It's a small thing, and hopefully down the line I'll be able to do more, but as long as we're all doing something, it's a step in the right direction.
This is not a small thing. This is a very big thing
Oh,
that you're
appreciate it.
here
Thank
with
you.
us. So thank you. There are some more people who have questions.
Of course,
I know Jake has a question, but I just want to say you are launching a production company. You have a podcast.
Yeah.
You're working on a documentary.
Yeah.
You're writing a book.
Yeah.
If you ever want to add teaching to your roster, I know people.
Okay.
I know some people. So,
All right.
just let me know.
I would love to. It's on the list. It is on the list.
I think Jake, yeah?
Hi, I'm Jake. Yeah. Having had a storied NCAA career, what do you think about the return of the new college football video game?
Ooh.
And specifically, how do you think the change in name, image, likeness is changing sports and transfer portal? Do you think that would have changed your decision to go to Washington?
Okay, Jake, cutting deep with that one. All right.
He knew I couldn't ask a question.
Yeah, that
like
was good.
Yeah, it's just
For
like-
those who don't know, the return of one of the best video games of all time is coming back, which is college football. Now, there was a time where college football and college basketball, you could play on a video game. Then all of a sudden, there were a few athletes, notably the O'Bannon brothers who played basketball for UCLA. they fought against the NCAA and said, wait a minute, you're putting us on video games, even though you don't have our names on the back of the jerseys of these characters, but you aren't paying us. You're paying the school. The school is already making hundreds of millions of dollars, and now these schools are signing billion-dollar contracts for football and basketball. So that pretty much ended the college football and basketball video games because they were cheap and they didn't want to pay each athlete. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, the name, image, and likeness, that has taken over college sports, which basically means now a college athlete, he will get his stipend, his weekly allowance of money to pay for his means of life. But he'll also, if he's good or she's good at their job, they can get a big fat check from the school or alums or companies that are coming in and paying these athletes. I think it's a beautiful thing because even though they say college is supposed to be amateur sports and athletes shouldn't get paid until they go pro, that's the greatest lie college has ever told athletes, because these colleges have been raking it in. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in network deals, merch deals, concessions from the stadium. I remember one day somebody broke it down like this. You walk into a stadium to watch a football game. Everybody's on salary. The coaches on salary, guaranteed contracts. The refs on salary. They make money. The people that are cleaning up the stadium, salary. Those who are working concessions, salary. Those who are punching the tickets, on salary. The only people that aren't on salary are the athletes. Now, I get it. You say, well, it's a free education. Yeah. At some schools, that education isn't enough for the amount of money these schools are raking in. So it is a slippery slope, because if you got big money, now you can pay the big players. But I love where college sports is at right now, and what we're seeing are different teams winning each year, which means, it's a little bit more balanced than it's ever been.
Anyone else?
Yes, hi. My name is Seema. Nice to meet you. So you talked a lot about uniqueness and about being yourself in the field, which I think is wonderful because a lot of us could get lost in that. But I wanted to know what your advice is for upcoming journalists that are applying to positions but are constantly getting rejected, and how we could stand out or, be seen and get into the field to showcase ourselves.
Yeah, I would say two things if you haven't already done it. One is continue to network. This is who you know business. It just helps to know people that are in the building. And that's why networking is key. And I know it's hard when you're busy, but sometimes in order to take a step up, you need somebody to reach down. And then also, I feel like you can apply pressure by, depending on the space that you're in and the career path you want to take, you can apply pressure by creating your own content. What's undeniable is the work that you put out on social media. The reason why a lot of athletes now are like really landing jobs as soon as they get done is because we have a ton of footage out there. Like, as you know, we love hearing ourselves talk. So, so we have podcasts and radio shows and TV shows. And if they don't have those shows signed on to a major network or platform, they just prop up their phone and do it themselves because they want to speak to their fan. Now, some guys do it in a very self-serving way just to hear themselves talk, not knowing that they are sending their resume out to the world every time they post something. So by the time they retire, these networks are like, oh man, that guy's really entertaining. I love it when he does his Throwback Thursdays or Make Sense Mondays or whatever he's doing. The same thing can happen for individuals that aren't in the sports space. You can figure out a way to use this phone, prop it up, create your content. If you're a writer, You write and you offer it up. You create your blogs or vlogs. If you're someone that aspires to be behind the camera, show your editing, your photography, videography. You put your work out there. Um, that's what's undeniable. Like, good work is undeniable. We used to say all the time, as athletes, we were concerned. A long time ago, we were concerned about going to a small school. It was like, if you're at a small school, it's gonna be tough for you to make it. It's gonna be tough because nobody's gonna see you. This is before like the internet and being able to post your highlights all over YouTube. But oftentimes the OGs in sports would say, if you're good, they'll find you. And I feel like it's the same thing in media.
Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for being here. You talked about being pigeonholed in different areas and trying to move from sports to news. Obviously, you're a man of many talents and many interests. How do you go about kind of advocating or deciding what stories need your attention and which don't? You know, like Jake mentioned, the one that pops off the top of my head is the union agreement at Notre Dame. But then, you know, there are these other top news stories breaking out every day. So how do you go? Obviously, you work with your producer as well.
Yeah.
But how do you go about saying, you know, my attention needs to be here, even though this interests me?
Yeah, that's hard for me because I so desperately want to add as much value to my show as I can. I want to make an impact, and my team does too. So we have pitch meetings. And I remember the first one, I was doing more listening than I was talking. I thought a pitch meeting was my team of producers, they're just going to pitch ideas to me. And I'll say, yeah, I'm interested in that or not. And that's how it went. Second pitch meeting we had, I came in with 2 pages, handwritten, front and back on each side. Said, here's the stories that I want to tell. Everything from finance, sports, societal issues, policy change, freedom of speech, focus on this new age of influencers, writing out who I wanted to sit with, the characters. Some of them were fully baked out. Some of them were in the early stages. And after we had this pitch lunch, I gave it to my team and I said, all right, let's try to scratch some of these things off the list. Now, I'm blessed enough to have a team that can execute those things. It's a little bit harder when resources are limited, but you have to make a decision. For me, in news, it really comes, because there's 1,000 stories that we want to tell, and there's 1,000 stories that float across our desk all the time. The decision is, what story does your heart want to tell, and what story do you think can make an impact for the platform you're using it? For CBS Mornings, I have to be realistic. We want to tell good stories, but we also want it to rate well, and we want it to have great engagement on social media, and we want people to look at the work we did as a team and say, oh, we see that Burleson squad, they're putting in good work, top to bottom. So it depends on where this is living, I would say. And then if the perfect symmetry is if deciding on how it will do on the platform you are providing that story for and your heart following it, like that's when it's a perfect marriage and you know that it works. Like if those two things match, tell that story.
Is there another question?
Yeah. First, thank you for coming here. I'm an alumni of school. I graduated in 2013, so I'm super excited to come back and hear you. I want to talk and ask about just the news environment, particularly television, and that morning breaking news cycle. We've had a lot of really big news stories over the course of the past year, and we're going into the election cycle when there's going to be even more. So talk to me about the collaboration that is involved in putting that show and going live every morning at 7 and what it takes for you and your teams to really get those stories on the air.
It's it's poetic chaos. You know, so okay, let's start like this. I wake up at 4, head into the city. I get to my office and I'm trying to prep for the show as it's put together. Get my makeup on. I sit down at the table at around 6. I like to be the first one there, just so I can have a little bit of extra time to prepare. Hopefully, the show goes according to plan. Let's just say on this day it does, right? As it's scripted, the run of show looks exactly the same as it's gonna go. We get done at 9. There's no post-show obligations. I'm good. I get to head home a little bit early. I'm home around 11 a.m., chilling, relaxing. Now, this is what happens in the world of news. I can say, all right, today went well. I'm going to wake up, and Wednesday it's going to be the same. I can go to sleep, wake up, and the world's upside down. Like literally ripping up everything you thought the show was going to be. By the time you get in, you have to be on your toes. And that's why I like to get there early, because sometimes you are prepping for a completely different show. Now, in a very rare occasion, you might even have technical difficulties. I remember one show we came in, half the show was ripped up because of breaking news. Somehow we had bugs in the system. We couldn't even get the monitors on. So we're right down the street at 15:15, and the producer's banging on doors like a RA in the dorms. Hey, yo, we gotta go to the broadcast center. Like, what do you mean? We gotta go. Grab your stuff. Let's go. You'll get makeup over there. We're doing the show from there. I'm like, what do you mean doing the show from there? It's 6:15. Yeah, we're going live at 7. We gotta get everybody in the car. We gotta go over there because nothing is working here. So now we're grabbing all of our stuff. We're hopping in the car, trying to prep for the show. You get there, you settle down, you slow your heart rate. 5, 4, 3, 2, final breath, 1, we're on. And people at home don't know the difference. So some days it's the coolest job and it goes exactly how Coach drew it up, right? Other days, it is a fire drill. That's the rush of morning news.
So 1515 Broadway is right here, just a couple blocks away.
Yep.
The broadcast center is on 57th Street, so that's a hike.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit of
That's
a hike.
I
Yeah,
wasn't sure
morning
if they
traffic.
knew that.
For
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. We have time for one last question, I think, and then you got to go to class. And
What time is class?
It's like, what time is your class? 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock? Okay, so we got a little bit of time. Yeah.
Hi, over here.
Okay,
Hi, my name is Natalie. Thank you for speaking to us today. You seem like you have a very busy life. And I guess when you're working, it might not feel like work because you're passionate about it, but how do you find that work-life balance? Like to just be a person with a life that's not about work?
Yeah. Nah, it feels like work. I ain't gonna lie to you.
That's because you're doing a lot.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot. It feels like work. I mean, there's been a couple of times that my team would be like, hey, you need to take your ass to bed. Like, you look sleepy. But that's when I'm really at the end of a long stretch of hard work days. But, I'll take you back to the moment I first got to New York. So I was working for the NFL Network. I was flying into LA every few days, and I was analyst. There was a guy by the name of Dan Helly, this white guy. Talk about inclusion, a guy who was including me into the world of being a host. He sits next to me as we're sitting in this locker room, is what we called it when we got done with the show. And he says, hey, I know they have let you host a few things on our digital platform. You should start paying attention to how I prep for the show. This is the host of the show, a non-football player, a white dude, who is telling the football guy, start paying attention to how I get ready for the show, because you have what it takes to be a host in whatever field. He said, and if you can host a show, then they don't need to call someone like me when I'm sick. They can just look at you, you can do it. The reason I bring that up is because from that moment, I started paying attention to how he scripted the show, how he brought us in, how he controlled the conversation, how he tossed the commercial breaks, how he kind of drove us in and out of conversations. And that was the first time I realized I wanted to do more than just football. Then they offered me a job here in New York. I had to uproot my family, move to New York. It was scary as hell. I'm a West Coast guy. I came to visit New York years before, and I didn't know how to cross the street because there's too many honking horns. And I was hesitating, and I remember somebody was yelling at me. It was like, just keep moving. And I was in the crosswalk frozen. I was like, who is this old man yelling at me? And I looked back, and it was an old lady. I said, oh, New York is crazy. So that right there had me real hesitant about moving to New York. So I get here, and I realize in order to be the best version of yourself, you have to match the energy of New York. And New York will reward you if you give everything to whatever you're chasing. I went a little too far. So here's to your question. I started saying yes to everything. I'm in New York, right? You can make it here, you can make it anywhere. You got to grind. Nate, can you do this? Yes. Nate, can you host this? Yes. Nate, we're not paying. It's cool. Nate, can you do this? Yeah. All right, cool. Fashion, sports, entertainment. I was saying yes to everything. One day I'm at home washing my face, and I look down, and there's hair in the sink.
Oh.
And I'm like, damn, I didn't get my hair cut today. That's strange. Like, well, maybe I was a little too rough. A couple days later, doing the same thing, more hair. I started getting alopecia. These circular patches all in my beard and then on top of my head. So I'm stressing, because, I like a little facial hair. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I see you got the little soul patch right there. I mean, you got to keep a little something. You can't go completely bald, you know what I mean? Black guys, I'm saying. White dudes, you can, you know what I mean? It's good. Butt naked black guy face is weird. I'm joking. So I go to the dermatologist and she's asking me questions and she's like, well, what's going on? Do you have a history of alopecia in your family? I'm like, no, I don't. Well, tell me about your life. And I'm like, oh, well, and I moved to New York and so I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and working a few different jobs. I just want to be really good at them, but now it's life, I'm working. And she's like, okay, what else? She's like, oh, I used to play football and, I was a receiver and, I lasted 11 years. And she's like, oh, you're stressed. I'm like, stressed? She's like, yeah, your body is responding to stress. It's giving you a signal. And I'm like, no. How is that? Like, I just told you I used to play football. And I used to avoid 250-pound men that wanted to break me in half. Like, that was stressful. And she's like, no. When you were talking about football, you were smiling. When you weren't talking about those other jobs, what you're doing now, you had a frown on your face. She was like, you are stressed out. You have to figure out where to place your energy because right now you are walking around depleted. And it was an eye-opening conversation. I might as well just kick my legs up and been talking to a therapist because it put things in perspective that I couldn't say yes to everything, that I couldn't exhaust myself trying to prove to people that I could do a good job or that I was a versatile talent. And that was the moment where I realized taking care of self is taking care of everybody else. And that started with the jobs I was taking, focusing on my mental health, and then knowing when to say no. Because even though we feel like time is of the essence, I have to say yes to everything, one of my mentors told me there's a lot of power in saying no because you give yourself a chance to reset and reboot.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Wow.
Is that it?
I think so. I don't see any
I had a
more
good time.
hands. No, we had a
This was
terrific time.
fun.
This was terrific. Thank you so much for all of your fantastic advice. That was for students, but I'm going to take all of this advice too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me. Seriously, thank you for sitting in. I don't take it lightly. Thank you for just lending me your ear and giving me your time.
Thank you.